It's time for a little bit of waffling about whether my heat pump was a waste of money and a quick review on the winter performance. This video is mainly going to be going through your comments. There seems to be some strong views, both for and against heat pumps. But let's see if we can try and work through some of this. Anyway, can't wait for a bit of nerding out tomorrow morning when this video is released. I have to say that I really look forward to your videos. Thank you very much for saying so. There's many times where I say to my wife, there's no point me carrying on with YouTube because it takes a lot of time and effort, and it's sometimes hard to see whether it is worth it and whether we're actually trying to make a difference on what my kind of purpose of doing YouTube is, and that is to try and combat some of the misinformation. So if there's a small handful of people out there who benefit from this video, then give us a thumbs up and do all of the YouTube stuff to try and help, because it is difficult to keep going. I really like the format where you release a new video on a Saturday morning and review the comments during the week. Okay, I'm trying to get into that. I notice also that there are quite a number of people that unsubscribe when the comments videos go live. So I think it's nice for the community, but of course, if people aren't totally invested in the channel and what I'm trying to do, then maybe that's this kind of video is the one that they find too boring and they check out. So I don't know, but for now I'm going to keep going with it anyway. You're asking all the same questions that I've asked about heat pumps, but unfortunately I still don't have one, as the installers in Ireland and the heat pump manufacturers aren't much better, lacking Vaillant, EBAC or any of the decent UK brands. Keep up the good work. Well, I hope soon, Alan, you'll be able to jump on the heat pump bandwagon, because it's been doing really well for us. And as you can see from my videos, I'm very happy and a big advocate. The issue with heat pumps are the installation costs. John Zach 2057. Let's see what the comments say first before I chime in with my 2 cents. This is true, but once done, it's not a repeating cost like with combi boiler. A replacement is quite cheap, but the initial install of a combi central heating system is expensive. Also, if your motivation is reducing emissions, it's a bargain compared to an EV, unless you are commuting a huge amount. Very wise words. Joe Wentworth, always chiming in with really good stuff on the channel. He'd be another guest that I'd love to have on a little Zoom chat at some stage, and we can all sit together in our little echo chamber feeling smug about heat pumps. I wouldn't be considering it if it wasn't for the 7,500 government grant. Agreed, we did it on the 5k grant. That's what we were going to originally do until that was up to 7.5k, and luckily everything kind of just fell in line at the right time for us to benefit from that. But in the end, the grants are small fry compared to the staggering fines we face if the UK fails to meet net zero targets set out in the Paris Agreement. The fines would be a spectacular waste of tax. Spend it fixing the problems. Our 2023 gas costs were $4.95. Sadly, the vast majority of people would be motivated by financial savings, not CO2 savings. Fair enough. True again, mass environmental migration or catastrophic UK flooding or drought of our once green and pleasant land. I think that should be the old national hymn, whatever it's called. I forget now. Might motivate a few. With a bit of luck, not too little too late. Hopefully gas will stop being subsidised too. Yeah, we can only dream on that one, I think. John Zach, there's some great points in here, but this isn't always true. Look at my last video where I compared a HeatGeek installation against a Octopus installation compared to a gas boiler installation from Heatable. That was just, I picked out 2 properties that I know very well and that I'm very familiar with, and I know they'd both be reasonable candidates to have a heat pump installation. For us personally, the heat pump installation was cheaper than replacing our gas boiler, because at the same time we needed, because of new building regs, once you change a certain amount of stuff, then you have to convert to an unvented system. People out there, heating engineers, will correct me on exactly this. I can't remember exactly which part of the new building regs stipulate that, but basically because we were looking to go to low temperature heating, change radiators, change the boiler. We would also be wanting to change the cylinder, taking the cold water tank out and changing it from a gravity-fed, open vented system to unvented system. By the time we factored all of that stuff in, that worked out more expensive than a heat pump installation. Now, of course, not everyone's going to be in that situation, but there will be a lot of people. So if we can spread this message to people and people can think ahead of time before it's a distress purchase to change your boiler, then you do benefit from 20% VAT reduction on the whole installation. That's radiators, labour, absolutely everything. You get VAT relief on it. And also then you get the $7,500 grant, which for a lot of people, that will bring a heat pump in perfect contention with a gas boiler. Anyway, that's way too long on a couple of questions. Your videos have been very useful. Thanks for taking the time to share your research and experiences. You are very welcome. Thank you for watching. Thank you for all your efforts over the past few months. For anyone considering a heat pump installation, your real-world observations and comprehensive data gathering has been invaluable. That is very good that's very affirming. Thank you very much. That does help to have nice comments to keep us going, keep me motivated to keep producing content and share our real-world experience. How do you think the attic insulation improved your heat loss? I have exact data on that somewhere. I will probably type it in the comments to you now later because I don't want to run away with this video. But roughly speaking, I think up in our loft insulation from the previous 150 millimeters to 350 millimeters, I think that reduced the overall heat loss of the house by about 600 to 700 watts off the top of my head. But I did these calculations more than a year ago now. So this is a little bit foggy in my memory, but I'll look up the exact figure and I'll reply to you in that comment to let you know exactly how much it was. The biggest improvement on our heat loss was the conservatory roof, which I insulated. That knocked off, I think, 2 kilowatts, I want to say, off the overall heat loss just by installing a kit roof that went on the conservatory to make it, up to very, very impressive U values. Your gas estimate was way above mine. Similar size house, but no conservatory. 2003 year build house, 8-year-old Worcester Bosch combi set at 53C. Same 4-bed detached, small though, 1997. Mixer shower, 2023 495, excluding standing charge. I just realised. Oh, okay. So that's not including standing charges. Fair enough. Okay. I don't know what to. I don't know if you're just referring to my projections or if you're referring to my previous year recorded data. All I have to say about that is you've got an 8-year-old Worcester Bosch combi. You've set it at 53 degrees C. I'm guessing it's still on on-off controls, not weather compensated, but you're going to be probably in the 85 to 90% efficiency range, something like that, depending on how yours is cycling. Keep in mind that our previous boiler, it was around 60%, so it was very inefficient. Yours is a 2003 as well, so I can't remember when the building regs in that era changed. I want to say it was around 2003 that the levels of insulation were improved. Ours is a 96, 97 build, so similar to Stuart Burns, I guess. But your gas consumption figures are, I think, reasonable. They're impressive. Bear in mind you need to add standing charges on top. But yeah, on some of the slides, I didn't include standing charges as well. So that's a fair enough comparison. I hope anyway, it's difficult to compare houses. We've got different lifestyle, different comfort level, all sorts of variables. But I hope anyway that my data is just going to just kind of show you something. Hopefully it demonstrates that if nothing else, a heat pump is not more expensive than a gas boiler. If that's the only thing I can get through to you people watching at the other side of YouTube, then mission accomplished. If I can show that you're going to save a massive load of carbon, there's no doubt in that. No one can argue against the carbon savings, whilst just cost parity, then great. If you can save some money as well, then okay, you can have your cake and eat it. Superb content yet again. I'd be interested to know which heat pump you think is better than the Vaillant. I watch EV Man and he has the same unit as you and tends to know what he's talking about, so they must be pretty decent, I'm guessing. I've watched a couple of videos of EV Man. He seems like an okay guy. I don't know what his... I don't know a huge amount about his system. I know he's got a different one than I have, but I can't remember if he's got a 5 kilowatt with a hydro unit or something. Anyway, it was the hot water tank he said that could be better if that's what you're referring to. Be interested to know which tank, of course. Thanks for pointing out. So yes, in my mission to observe heat pumps on heatpumpmonitor.org, maybe I should make a dedicated video about that. What to look for, how to navigate the website, and some of the things that you can glean from that data by studying. And if, like me, you've got multiple monitors, then you can very quickly pull up 2 or 3 heat pumps that they may all be Vaillant 7 kilowatt units, for example, and then you can look at the different variables and you can quickly establish, okay, there's a hot water cylinder that has a larger capacity coil that is doing better with the heat transfer and is more efficient on the hot water cycle. I can't remember off the top of my head what make they were. I want to say maybe Gledhill or something. All I know anyway is you can look up on the data sheets the specs of most of the cylinders and their coils, and the larger surface area the better. That's basically the crux of the matter. But these are like marginal gains, so don't get too stressed about it. Yeah, the difference in COP between the very best cylinder and a Vaillant middle of the range bundled cylinder that comes with a heat pump, you're really only talking the difference between a COP on your domestic hot water cycle of 3.5 to 3.6, maybe 3.5 to 3.7. It's a small amount, especially considering how little the energy consumption is for your domestic hot water cycle. So the improvement on the COP on a domestic hot water cycle is kind of negligible throughout the winter because most of the energy is used in space heating for the rest of the home. Of course, that will change going into summer, but we've also got warmer outside temperatures, which are also naturally improving the COP at the same time. Interesting you sharing this, but you've gone from pretty much the worst gas boiler with modest insulation to top tech heat pump with good loft insulation. It's kind of like the evangelists who go from... I like that, evangelists who go from a 40k 30 mpg performance car to an EV and then proclaim EVs will save everyone money. We're in a 4-bed detached 1997 built cavity wall house. I did the loft leg 300 mil. Yeah, still on a boiler, and our shower is a mixer, so boiler fed 2 adults and 2 late teenage girls. Well, I know some teenage girls use a lot of hot water in their showers. Each person's circumstances are different, but with our microbore piping, not necessarily a showstopper, ripping out the majority of radiators on top of a heat pump. Payback would be 10 plus years, I suspect. This granted doesn't take into account our PV and battery setup, but I see the heat pump was robbing Peter to pay Paul energy usage wise. Yeah, this is a good point actually. A lot of people say it is the trifecta of energy consumption is put a load of solar panels on and then just use that to power your heat pump. But the reality is the sun isn't shining most of the time when you want to heat your house, unless you've got insane battery storage. Perhaps the best option is just to do what I call seasonal offsetting and export as much as you can in the summer so that your bills will be cheaper in the winter. But of course you can do that with a gas boiler anyway. So yeah, I don't necessarily buy into all of that. I think you've put a balanced thing together there. The only thing I'd say is, once again, if you're are you the person who said that your gas boiler's 8 years old? When you're coming up to changing your gas boiler, then you just want to be proactive, and I guess the whole not just preventative maintenance, but getting ahead of not needing a distressed purchase to just slam in another gas boiler. The radiator upgrades, they're really not invasive at all. I wouldn't worry about that. I mean, for most of mine, I went round and did one by one, and you can just turn off the valves to that one radiator, quickly replace it. In the end, I think it was taking me 20 to 30 minutes. I was just the layman, just taking my time. And half of those, my young kids were helping me with as well. So I wouldn't worry about that too much. In terms of payback, I want to stop talking about the ROI and the payback on it, because quite honestly, after the first winter, I'd pay a premium to have a house as comfortable as ours has been. And that's not just compared to how bad some bits of this house were, because the heat was so inconsistent and it had hot and cold pockets everywhere. But compared to any house I've ever lived in, the house is now consistently so warm and comfortable and just doesn't have hot and cold spots. And yeah, I don't majorly feel the cold anyway, but now I've got used to this. I go into other people's homes and they're all feeling cold. And even some homes, which one room is like boiling hot, you go in the next room, you go out in their kitchen, it's like freezing cold. So I don't know, but I know that ultimately we've all got budgets, and if money were no object, I'm sure a lot of people would have heat pumps in an instant. But I'd say Stuart Burns, do it sooner rather than later, because the grants won't last forever. At the moment, it looks like there's no end in sight, so you've probably got a couple of years to be safe. But by the end of this year, we're probably going to have another new government, and who knows where they might turn their attention to. So at the moment, carbon emissions from domestic heating are low-hanging fruit, and it's an easy one for the government to try and target. But the grants have really kick-started and ramped up the heat pump market massively. And so eventually that will just naturally snowball and it won't need any government intervention, will it? Okay, David Ayres, very true. Replacing the boiler with a more efficient boiler and doing the radiators would mean as much lower flow temperature, which would have reduced his gas cost massively. Yeah, I mean, I just touched on that on the previous video, and I did include some of the calculations where if I'd have gone for a condensing boiler rather than our old inefficient boiler, doing the radiators, I'd already done the radiators way before we changed to a heat pump. But the problem with that was it kind of accentuated the, I don't know, it increased the delta between the temperatures in the room. So we ended up with larger radiators in most of the rooms, which then were very, very warm. But then the colder room, we tried everything to try and push that warm air from the rooms that were too hot into the colder rooms, and we were just fighting against things. I doubt the efficiency figures for the old boiler, as I have a Potterton, and that, according to the data sheet, is 80% efficient. He is claiming 60% for his old boiler when new, and that the older boiler has a sticky valve which should have been picked up on a service because of it was leaking gas that could have been explosive, or British Gas were... Okay, not uncommon with British Gas. Okay, this is an important point, David. So my boiler was an Ideal Classic. Oh, I'm going to forget the actual number. If you go back a few videos, I show you exactly which model it was, because there's 25 different Ideal Classics. Maybe there's even more than that, I don't know. And you can go down the list and you can pick out all the Ideal Classics, and they range. And literally, my Ideal Classic, I don't know why, it seemed to be the worst of the worst. And if I had the next model up, I don't know if that was it, I don't know if they were produced at the same time or if it was just one iteration newer. I want to say it was an RS50. Does that? So, I don't know. There's going to be heating engineers anyway out there that will probably know what I'm talking about. Mine seemed to be the most inefficient, but also the heating engineers that came to the house, they also said they are totally bomb-proof. So they said, although mine was 26, 27 years old, they said it probably would have gone for another 26 to 27 years without needing much maintenance. Because they said apart from things like the sticky valve was probably because this house was empty for almost a year before we moved in. I don't know, that could be something. And one of the things we didn't perform a service on the boiler because we knew we were going to replace the boiler straight away. It turned out that we lived in the house for a lot longer before we replaced the boiler because of the whole heat pump thing, and it ended up taking a lot longer than we expected, and we were here for over a year before we ended up getting that boiler replaced. And I hoped originally we were going to replace it with a nice Wiesmann 200, really good modulating, high efficiency boiler in the first kind of month or two. Got the heating engineers in, and then we started identifying a few issues that were going to make that difficult and expensive because of new tank and everything else, and then we turned on the heat pump. So anyway, this is a long way of saying that on the spec sheet, I think from memory, it was 65.4% efficient when it was brand new. An Ideal Classic RS50. I think it's an RS50. Maybe it's an RS250. I don't know. But the subsequent model of that, the superseded model, was 71 or 72% efficient. Your Potterton, I don't know if that's in the same age range, but clearly at 80% efficient, it was a much more efficient boiler than mine when it was new. The sticky valve was almost stopped us from having the heat pump installed, because they have to do a drop test when there's a change, or when they cap off the meter or remove the boiler or whatever they do. When they work on the gas system, before they do anything, they plug their machine in by the meter. There's like a little nipple or something on there, and then they do like a pressure loss test, and straight away they found that there was a loss on the system. He first of all thought it was the gas hob. We were messing around with the gas hob. We eventually found that isolator hidden in the kitchen cabinets. We managed to isolate that. The pressure loss was still there. It was still leaking, so we tried to find if there was a different isolator further down the leg, further towards the gas. Further towards the gas meter, and we couldn't find one. Anyway, they were pretty convinced that I'd put a screw straight through a gas pipe, because I'd put shelving up all across my garage. You would have seen that in some of my other videos, all my shelving everywhere. I was confident it wasn't, because I'd used an electronic stud finder and I'd used my old-fashioned magnet as well, and I knew there were no pipes in the wall, and the gas pipe was run low level, and I had no shelves down there. So I had to battle with them like there must be something, and I was convinced at the time it was something to do with the boiler. And I was vindicated in the end, because finally, when they isolated the boiler, the pressure loss stopped, and I saw it myself on the meter, and I want to say it's 10 or 15 millibar, but it wasn't British Gas just talking rubbish. They were. I was there hand in hand with them in the kind of process of elimination to find out what had what was causing the issue. Anyway, I didn't articulate that very elegantly, but I hope you get the point. You might have your doubts, but look up the Ideal Classic RS50, and I'm sure you'll find it's that 65.4% that I estimated. And then I don't really know how to account for a 10 to 15 millibar leak through the gas valve. I have no idea really if that's a huge issue. I think from what I understand, the sticky valve is only an issue when the boiler's not kicking in. When it's kicking in, it's burning that, and so it's not necessarily completely wasted in the combustion cycle. But then when the boiler's off, for example, it was just constantly trickling gas on the outside. I'm not anti-heat pumps, but there is a slightly fanatical tilt to EV and heat pump enthusiasts to the point where they exclude some of the costs to justify their position. Likewise, the anti-heat pump brigade do state a lot of worst-case scenarios and fear-mongering. There is a happy medium, which I think this chap has achieved to a degree. Well, thanks. That last comment is reassuring that I'm trying to find a balance. The thing that worries me is because there's so much negative media, I do think people who are advocates of heat pumps and EV almost feel like we've already got our backs up, and so feel like we have to try and overcompensate to fight against some of that negative media. And that polarization, it's just not helpful for a good debate, is it? So I hope sometimes these longer chats can see that you can see I'm just a reasonable, normal person, and I'm not a crazy eco warrior. I want to do my bit. But a lot of the improvements are comfort related and very selfish things. And mentioning finances are just demonstrating my selfish nature as well, which I'm sure lots of you might be able to identify with. I have mentioned on previous things about the Venn diagram of people who go into renewable things like EVs and heat pumps and stuff, and maybe that's a whole nother video because there's a big discussion around that. And I don't think any reason for getting a heat pump is a bad reason. They're all going to be saving us a lot of carbon. They're going to be making heating systems more efficient because we just have to. They will force us into low temperature heating. And then there's a lot of comfort benefits and other associated factors as well. So I think any reason that someone makes that step is a good one. But anyway, this is referring back to me. He had a choice between a new gas boiler, which would have reduced the cost by up to 20% compared to the old 65% efficient boiler, and a heat pump, which reduced the cost by 2 to 3 times. This year, the cost has been reduced 3 times versus the old boiler, which is still functional in hybrid mode. Are you now talking about your situation? Because I think you're talking about my situation at the front, which is right at the beginning, which is correct. And then I'm guessing your boiler is still functional in hybrid mode. Once again, I don't really see the point personally of hybrid heating systems. I don't think we need them in the UK. Maybe in much colder climates, they're necessary. Maybe if you're in Scotland, I know that you can still get some grants with hybrid heating systems, but not here in England. So once again, financially, they don't make any sense to have a hybrid in England. Okay, that was a lot. Spot on with the video. I wish that this is a different video. Sorry, I was trying to stick to one video. I wish that the manufacturer would all have a standard whereby at 35 degree flow, they should show the output and COP at +7, 0, -3 and -7. It would make it a bit easier to pick the correct model. Also, it would be useful to show the minimum output at +7 degrees C. Yeah, I was thinking about this and exchanged notes with another enthusiast, and we were both kind of coming to the conclusion that actually +7 degrees and -3 would be a good way to kind of condense that. And if you could show the output and the COP at a +7 and a -3, then that would be brilliant. Even better, it would be good if we could then integrate into that some weather compensation. So like the rated figures at -3 degrees would be at 45 degree flow temperature, for example, but then at +7 degrees, maybe you say the flow temperature is at 30 degrees, for example, and then you've obviously got the scale and the slope in there. But manufacturers could bury this in their data sheets, and they've got this information anyway, but those two figures would probably be the most helpful for most people as the kind of headline figures on the main data sheet, the snapshot, the 1A4 sheet. +7 degrees, 30 degree flow temperature, -3 degrees, 45 degree flow temperature. The rated output in kilowatts, also accompanied with the COP, and that would just be so good, wouldn't it? But thanks, Martin, for your comment. 59 for the month. Sorry, is this April Fool, or have you installed the heating in a doll's house? That would be every 2 to 3 days for me. You must be running it at 16 degrees. Well, Reg Plate, you're very welcome. I'm glad that my April Fools made you laugh. Our doll's house is a 140 square metre, 4-bed detached house, so not the biggest house in the world, but far from the smallest. if £59 just for heating and hot water lasts you 2 to 3 days, thank you for taking the time to watch this from Windsor Castle. You're very welcome to keep watching from your royal throne, but no one in any kind of residential house, joking aside, should pay £59 per month for every 2 to 3 days. It doesn't matter what heating system you've got or what house you've got. No one. There's no one who should be paying that. You must be running at 16 degrees. I do have the setback set to 16 degrees overnight. The temperature rarely falls that far. I wish it did, because it would make it more comfortable for sleeping. But yeah, from 8 o'clock in the evening through to 6 o'clock in the morning, it's set at 16 degrees. But most of the time, it rarely falls below 17 degrees, even when we've had some cold evenings. So no, it's very comfortable, very warm. Thank you very much. You're welcome to come and sample how warm the home is. Here's some questions, some follow-up questions and issues, but no, Reg has not commented back. But there's a few people here. Oh, you made a mistake of living in a castle, yeah. There's a few people here that are willing to help. With the windows shut, yeah. But seriously, there's some good stuff in here, yeah. There's some good stuff in here. You might want to speak to a local heating engineer, or put some of your details in the comments here, Reg. People will help. And there is, if you've got a heat pump, for example, you can make a massive improvement. If you've got a gas boiler, you may be able to reduce your consumption through tweaking the settings by up to 10%, possibly. And then you're going to have to look at insulation, drafts, those sorts of things. If it's a heat pump, changing your settings could be the difference between 200% efficiency and 400% plus efficiency. So you should definitely investigate your settings if for some reason you're on a heat pump. But if you're using £59 every 2 to 3 days, then you're probably stuck on an immersion heater and your settings are terribly wrong. I'd be interested in how you can use Home Assistant to improve things, but that's definitely the nerd in me. Metalhead 2550, it's not something I'm going to delve into because I just don't have the time for it. Oh, I wish I did. I'd love to have a play with it. Ultimately, our solar inverter does have an integration that you can bring the information into Home Assistant. There's a separate bus controller that you can integrate into Vaillant heat pumps and into Daikin heat pumps. Probably others as well, but those are the only two that I've done a little bit of investigation, a bit of research into. Those controllers can then, in Home Assistant, you can take that data from your solar inverter, and every time it's exporting, and you can set thresholds. So if it's exporting more than 1 kilowatt, then you can tell it to fire up the heat pump and start pumping some heat into the house. Now, running it that way will negatively affect your COP, but overall your running costs will probably be lower because in my case, I'm getting 50p per kilowatt hour for exporting, and my import is 18p per kilowatt hour. Also, you could do things like, if I'm exporting more than a kilowatt for a certain time, then it increases the likelihood that I'm going to have a sustained period of export, and it could trigger your domestic hot water cycle. And you can set up rules like that using Home Assistant and using the bus integration. But I'm not going to be the channel that's going to give you a walkthrough on that, I'm afraid. Just checked on my gas boiler is 75.4 efficient from new. Even with those figures and a copper 4.1, it would save 175 odd per year, assuming my boiler was actually hitting that efficiency, which is unlikely. Scop even, yeah. Sean S1000, if your boiler is 75.4 efficient, then it will be a non-condensing old gas boiler, and so it's quite likely that you are achieving close to your efficiency. As long as it's not doing excessive cycling. It's more the newer condensing boilers that really struggle to reach their claimed efficiency. Big one. Given the savings versus installation of the heat pump and solar, it's not worth it. Well, I disagree, and I kind of covered a lot of those points because the installation of our heat pump was cheaper than renewing the gas boiler system, so we would have saved money anyway. Solar, that's a different question. I can cover that in one of my future videos because I've got one coming up about how well our solar is doing. It's going to pay for itself in the time that we're going to be in this house. But it's not necessarily, if it's all about the financials for you, then okay, fine. But you can look at the previous video I did about installation costs, and that some homes will have a heat pump installed cheaper than a new gas boiler anyway. And in terms of solar, depending on what the energy markets do in the future, your payback could be anywhere from 4 years to 12 years, and battery can really affect that as well. So if you're not planning on being in the home for that long, then fine. But yeah, there are other factors. I've mentioned comfort. Chris here is talking about planets and your grandkids. Given there are disposal issues, I'm not sure what you mean by planet or grandkids. I'm planting trees. So well, good on you for planting trees. Disposal issues. There are also disposal issues with gas boilers, I guess, in the same way as heat pumps have all the same components, and now the new ones were like R290, they have very little GWP in the refrigerant. You have a pathway to neutralize your energy bills and make profit, which is not possible sticking to endless gas bills and maintenance. Disagree, unless you're exploiting cheap overnight energy prices. The rest, when including time variations of capital, your argument is plain false. Test comes from someone who has solar and batteries. Is this comes from, maybe? So why exactly? Okay, right. Let's calm it down in the comments. We need to calm this down. I think really we need to have a good dialogue. We need to have a good positive dialogue, and we need to understand that people have very real concerns. And I do sometimes have some tongue-in-cheek comments, but hopefully we can always be respectful of even people who are very doubtful. What disposal issues are you referring to, and how do they compare to dumping CO2 and NOx, nitrous oxide, into the air that gas boilers do? Great question, and yet that isn't discussed in the video. Okay. Yeah, I guess the video headline was my heat pump a waste of money? So AEG, I mean, you're the one who did bring up the issue about disposal. So I thought that was kind of relevant that Ben is in Sweden came back on that. It seemed from your comment that you have more info on the subject. Heat pumps get recycled. Mitsubishi has a complete page on how their heat pumps are recycled. The refrigerants that are mostly used today, R32 and R290, can be evacuated and reused without issues. Unlike blend ones, e.g. R410A, solar panels are supposed to be mostly recyclable, but time will tell on that. Solar panels generally don't just stop working. The output falls. However, there are also schemes like the one Artisan Electrics has got involved in, with transporting older panels to third world countries that can provide power for them for years, possibly decades to come. Yeah, I think Ben is in Sweden has covered it all as always. Brilliant. I have a Daikin MXL 18,000 BTU enhanced capacity inverter driven compressor system in Canada. It's a cold climate heat pump. It works extremely well, maintaining 22°C down to -12 outside on a 1,100 square feet home. Very impressive. Thank you for sharing that all the way from Canada. Great video. Our house is 1989. I'm thinking about switching to a heat pump, even though our boiler isn't that old. Gutted the bus grant wasn't about when we had the boiler change. We have micro bore 2 and looks like to be looks to be like yours, where it drops down off of a larger pipe. Have been adding larger, fancier rads as we've been doing the house up, so just hope they will be fine when we do make the switch. Have decided to go solar PV and battery first, as we use far more electricity than gas, which I hope will be in the next month or so. The deniers, skeptics will always moan. Doesn't matter how much you show them the cost data that something works, be that PV, air source heat pump, EVs, etc. They will always claim to know more than those presenting the information. Keep up the good work for those of us with an open mind. Oh, thanks, Steve, for your comment. That is a great comment, and there's some interesting points there. And I know a lot of deniers or skeptics, as you put it, they sometimes give me a hard time. I've got broad shoulders. I'm just sharing my data. I'm not trying to manipulate it. I'm just trying to present the raw data to you. And you'll see in some of my YouTube shorts, I show you directly from the Vaillant app, and I've shown my actual bills, and I'm going to start showing as well. Someone asked if I could actually show a copy of my Octopus Energy bill. I'll just blank out my address. I got nothing to hide on there. So yeah, I'm happy to share all of this information, but ultimately a lot of people have already been indoctrinated by the Telegraph and by, unfortunately, gas and oil lobbyists. And I don't want to go too much into conspiracy theories and stuff, but there's a lot of evidence about where a lot of these articles come from and who funds them. And FOI request on some articles was quite revealing a few months ago, that some Saudi oil group had funded a lot of the misinformation, well, I guess in this case disinformation, about heat pumps. And that gets then perpetuated and shared by people, that it kind of then becomes misinformation because people don't truly understand and don't really, they don't have a good perspective on how to absorb some of that information and that propaganda that's shared. And in one case, one extremely poor example of a heat pump was used to kind of tar them all with the same brush, and that installation was a good 8 or 9 years old anyway. So we've learned a lot about putting heat pumps into homes in the last few years, even though they've been using them for decades in commercial environments, and they've been very efficient and saving businesses money for decades. Did you sell your old radiators? Yes, I sold 2 of the old radiators. I got a couple old ones and wondering whether they'd get anything on Marketplace. You can look up how much a new one would be somewhere like Screwfix, but they're pretty cheap. There's such a range of sizes that I think you'd be unlikely to find anyone looking for a second-hand radiator. It depends. We changed a few, and the standard ones was slow to sell and didn't make much, but we had some designer ones which were hopeless from a heat output point of view, which people practically queued up for and made reasonable prices. Yeah, so true. I sold one of them just for, I don't know, 40, 50 quid, something like that. But it was a big size one that actually was damaged in transport to us. The company providing it didn't want it back, sent a replacement. So that one was free to me, and I think I sold it for 50 quid. I gave away a couple of other ones to people in need that had blocked radiators. And then all of the little single panel ones, I just took them all to the tip. I just got rid of them all at the tip. Like Robin Bennett has pointed out, most of them are dirt cheap. And also, I didn't think that anyone needed single panel radiators when we should all be upsizing our radiators to get lower flow temperature. But even if I'd managed to sell them, it would have been maybe 5 quid each and not worth the hassle. But it's interesting. In the past, I sold one that would be considered a designer one, which was horrific on the heat output, but it sold next day. And it just goes to show that people are way more interested in what a radiator looks like than how it performs. Form over function, I'm afraid. Did you cost your solar electric as free? If so, that's wrong, as it should be costed at your best available export rate. Consume solar now has a cost. It does, of course, depend on what export tariffs you have available, depending on your import tariff. PS, our gas bill for 2023 was $787 for a 5-bedroom detached house, so not too dissimilar to your yearly gas costs with a boiler. As you may remember, more solar and then an air source heat pump are my plans. Yes, thank you for pointing that out. That was an omission that I made when I was putting this video together. I hadn't considered the export and just the opportunity cost of what I could have been paid for the export if I hadn't have used it for the air source heat pump. But I hope you found it useful in the slides that I showed the costs, excluding solar and including the solar reduction as well. So if I muddied the waters a little bit by not including the lost capital or lost revenue from the export, then sorry, I apologize. But yes, your 5-bedroom detached house must have been more well insulated. I mean, I know that the huge heat loss for us was that ridiculous conservatory, and it's an open conservatory. There's no French doors or anything to seal it off, and that's where we're losing most of the heat. But even anyway, regarding domestic hot water, I don't understand how it does not last until the morning. It should not lose more than a few degrees in 18 hours. I would think with all your solar, I would think a little loss in efficiency and running the domestic hot water a few degrees hotter would be better financially and emissions standpoint. Also, cotton might be a tiny bit better in a warm afternoon. Yeah, I need to play with this a bit more, Joe. And I've been, to be quite honest with you, I've been a bit lazy and been trying to play it safe. So I'll run you through our schedule and maybe this will make sense a little bit. So my wife does the early shower at like 6 a.m. or whatever time early in the morning. I then shower I'm the late shower at about 7:30 a.m. After my wife, and then my kids bath in the evening before bed, and they get in the bath at like 6 p.m. You know, they're young kids. So what I normally do is I normally do the domestic hot water at like 8 p.m. So it's coming off the back of the heating, and then it's not running through the night, but I mean, it doesn't matter to us because we're not on a time of use tariff. Then the tank is fully topped off by like 9 o'clock. Cycle normally takes about an hour, and then we lose. There are ratings. The tanks are normally like 1 kilowatt per 24 hours or something like that they lose, which it isn't so much of an issue when the whole tank is hot. What becomes an issue is when you've already extracted some of the heat, so you haven't got the whole volume, and then so you have a bit of stratification, but you still have contained within that cylinder hot and cold water. And the more cold water that is inside that tank, the more heat loss that or not necessarily heat loss, but the water's going to mix, which is going to bring down the temperature of that stratified water at the top. So if I heat the hot water in the middle of the day, my kids then bath in the evening. By the time we then wake up the next morning, that water has had overnight to then mix within the hot water cylinder. Does this make sense? And then, so my wife has the first shower and has a successful hot shower. And then here you go, getting back to me being selfish. I then have the second shower. And by then, I'm the one who struggles to have a completely hot shower for my, 6, 7, 8 minutes, however long I'm feeling on that day. I'm not having an excessively hot. My shower is normally at 37 degrees. Yeah, we've got a digital one at 37 degrees. Occasionally I bump it up to 38 degrees if I'm feeling, want to indulge a little bit. So that's what I found so far anyway. But you're right. I could probably increase the temperature tank by a couple of degrees, and that may improve things. I could also run 2 cycles, and that that would definitely be okay. And if I'm running from free solar energy, then yeah, like you're saying, financially and emissions, it's probably still going to work out better. But anyway, If I do strike gold and find a combination that is a big improvement, then of course I'll update everyone on the channel. My headlines for March are electric bill 41.52, first month of heat pump, charging EV, running all horsepower. Best news is Octopus owe me approximately £15 off this, as they have not been accounting for my feed-in. 15p per kilowatt, about 100 kilowatt this month. Compared to last month, I paid 76 on electricity and 185 on gas, and you had no EV to charge at this time either. I think I'm better off. Yeah, I think you're definitely better off. Need to access my data for heat pump, fine-tune cop, but hoping can only get better. Downside, heat pump ruins your personal thermostat. Like you, other people's homes feel cold, turned up car heating, house is warm, comfortable all the time, despite costing a lot less to achieve. Yeah, I think I'm feeling the cold a lot more since we've had a heat pump. That's probably one of the only negatives, and struggling to sleep overnight because it's too warm. I know you like to quote the CO2 save figures, but for the majority of people this is irrelevant, and it's about saving money against a gas oil boiler. It's a shame that every install is individual to each house. Also, the people I speak to can't get their heads around the fact that you have to run an air source heat pump 24/7 through the winter months to make the savings. For quite a lot of people looking at a heat pump in 2024, it is relevant. Yeah, I mean, there's different schools of thought on that, and that's why I like to include everything. I want to account for everyone. It's more difficult to objectively cover the comfort factor, which for me is a huge win of heat pumps. But I can objectively put out the figures of carbon saved, which is humongous. And so for those people that is a motivating factor, whether it's a minor one or a major one, that doesn't really matter. Even if it's just a feel-good factor, I like to put out there and show people that it is a huge saving, and then put out some financial savings as well to, sweeten the deal, put the icing on the cake. But yeah, not everyone will save money, but I think everyone should be able to achieve running cost parity. And if we can get across the comfort factor of a heat pump, then I think we'll sell a lot more. But I don't know how we communicate that to people more effectively. Let me know in the comments how we can get that across to people without inviting the whole world into our homes, and then the door will be opening and closing. I'll be losing all my thermal mass all day long. For quite a lot of people, we already read that one. Great. Anyway, what are the annual service costs of your heat pump if you were to call the manufacturer out? I believe Vaillant quote about £200 per annum to service a heat pump. It is more expensive than a gas boiler. Can you share your spreadsheet? I would like to do the same on my system. Yep, no problem at all. Email me. It's upsidedownfork@outlook.com, and I'll share that with you. Good review, many thanks. It's very difficult to compare between the last two winters because December 22 was brutally cold, so cold that my Mondeo gave in for the first time ever, and my Zoe range was reduced to 90 from a usual 125 winter range. That was the headline anyway. I can't remember the rest of the winter, but comparing against this winter, which must be one of the warmest on record, isn't a good comparison. On this point, I should have put that in the video. You are right. This winter, over the course of the period that I was talking about, November to the end of March, average 1 degree warmer almost exactly where I live. So it was a warmer winter by 1 degree, so it shouldn't be a huge difference. I remember the December cold snap you're talking about because that was before we'd insulated the conservatory and we were freezing in our house. I had jumpers, coats, everything. I was in the kitchen, oven on, hob on, and we had 1, 2, 3 electric heaters in our kitchen dining area. And the coat I had on was like my big snowboarding one. Massive thing, and I was still freezing. I was absolutely freezing, and so yeah, it's not lost on me your point there. One more thought: does humidity affect COP? Logically, I would have thought it does. If so, is this something you could integrate into your figures for next winter? I did start monitoring the humidity because I thought it would drastically affect the COP on the negative side. The higher humidity, the worse performance. But actually, the difference was so negligible; it was hard to even form a trend line. And I plotted the data and I put it in there, and I got the just like I got the average temperatures for every day, I put the humidity levels in there. I just couldn't really seem to gauge that there was a huge difference. I don't know. Maybe it's something I can revisit, but I recorded that data for November, December, and the first week of January, and then I gave up because there was no form correlation, and I couldn't form a conclusive conclusion. So if you want to see that data, I could share it, but I just can't see it as beneficial to anyone. The humidity just doesn't seem to make much of a difference. But I'm also like 2 miles from the coast, and so our humidity is fairly consistent. I finally have a survey date from Octopus for my heat pump installation 6 months after placing the deposit. They honour the desktop quote, and I can reach my own at zero. Yeah, fingers crossed they quote the desktop quote. I haven't heard of any people that they go back on the first quoted number. I have heard of lots of people who are very surprised that they honour that original quote. Thanks for a great walkthrough on costs. Our old 20-plus-year-old Potterton boiler is reaching the end of its life, and we're looking at the alternatives. An online quote from Octopus beat all the others as well. I did a little digging and found the .gov page, which referred to the relaxation of the EPC for the bus grant, but I think an EPC is a valuable item if you haven't had a survey like us. The other tidbit I found was that Octopus have apparently bought out the heat pump manufacturer Red Limited in Northern Ireland last year. Yep, that's right. Red are very well regarded in heat pump circles, and heat pump engineers that have been around the block for a little while very much hold the Red heat pumps in high regard. So the heat pump Cozy 6 that's come in, I'm glad to see that they're not all going to be released in that crazy purple colour. It looks like they are going to do some dark greys that are going to be closer to probably the original Red colours, and it just looks like it's a little bit more of a cut price budget version from what I understand. So I'm following that anyway to see if it's going to be a big step up from the Daikin's that Octopus are currently installing, because Daikin is a tried and tested and it's a widely rolled out item, so it's gonna be easier to who knows, I shouldn't speculate too much, but if Octopus install a lot of Cozy 6 heat pumps, then it's not going to be difficult to find engineers to work on them if you need to and find the parts and everything else. Daikin's just way more established. So yeah, I guess that's what you're getting at with your comment at the end there. Excellent video. In summary, I've done a similar install, bigger heat pump installed about the same time my house is nice and warm, plus the cost is about a third, half of what the gas was the year before. I had similar cost savings last winter. Good to hear. Thank you for the reinforcement. I'm just a little bit west of you in Dorset. I had a Vaillant 5 kilowatt heat pump installed in February, so March was my first full month. It was a HeatGeek install. I've done nothing with insulation, but had 3 rads upgraded. March figures were 216 kilowatt hours for heating and copper 4.4, and 103 kilowatt hours for domestic hot water with a copper 3.1. Not on full weather compensation yet, but will be with next month. If you had a HeatGeek install, why did they not put it straight onto weather compensation? That one for me is difficult to understand. They are the biggest advocates for going on full weather compensation, and it took me a little while of adjusting my thinking, but now I am in complete agreement with the HeatGeek school of thought on that. Thermostat is set for these times. Domestic hot water set at 55 degree heat once a day at midday to make the most of any solar. So maybe because you've got different temperatures, you're not classing that as full weather compensation. But as long you can still have different desired target temperatures inside, and it can still be on full weather compensation. It's just whether it's reading the internal temperature and then adjusting according to that. I do have 15mm copper with 10mm micro bore dropping down to the rads. Excellent. Another one. I guess you don't have a buffer tank if you've got a HeatGeek installed. Let me know, please, if you've got a buffer tank for your 10mm. My total energy bill for March was 40% lower than the same period last year. Total energy usage in kilowatt hours 60% lower. Similar to your findings, we are benefiting from a consistently warmer and more comfortable house, and I'm so glad we did it. Excellent. Thank you for sharing, Chris Rowe. I don't have the money for solar, so it would be difficult for me to guess what my savings would be. Still enjoyed the video, though very detailed. Thanks. Thank you for your comment. And the last one, finally, sorry that this video has taken so long. Thanks for your videos. They are really helpful. I've got a Vaillant 7 kilowatt heat pump installed last Friday with the with a setup exactly as yours with a 45-litre buffer. Good. I'm trying, well, good or not, I don't know, but it's working out okay for us. I'm trying to figure out how to get the OEM level 3 monitoring set up. I've seen a couple of videos about it, but was wondering if you have some advice on how you set up yours. Is it something I can do myself? Though by the looks of it, it seems as if help from a plumber plus electrician would be advisable. Thoughts? So my monitoring equipment is the Vaillant owned stuff. It does need an additional module for me to access the data. That can be added to any Vaillant Aerotherm Plus heat pump. I think even the old Aerotherm heat pumps. And all you need is you need a socket for a little 3-pin DC plug adapter. I think it's a 9-volt one, maybe a 12-volt one. And then you just need to connect the 2 bus cables into any part on the data connection on your heat pump. So that can be in your main controller. If you've got a wired sensor comfort, it could go into that. Anywhere on that bus network, you can then just piggyback into the bus cables and you can connect it into the module, and then you'll have access to the app. You'll have access to exporting the data, and you'll be able to drill down into some of that information for reviewing it for your own personal reasons, or for sharing online and combating the spread of misinformation. What else do I need to say before I wrap up this video? I really appreciate everyone watching and commenting and contributing to this season of heating and all of the heat pump videos. It's now been several months. I've wanted to keep this kind of raw and unedited for many reasons, and I just want people to understand that I'm not trying to sell anything. I'm just sharing my experience. If people want to follow my lead, brilliant. If people choose not to, then that's everyone's prerogative to do so. I work in the motor trade. I work in a dirty carbon industry, and so I don't have anything to personally gain by you installing a heat pump. The only thing you can do is sign up to Octopus Energy using my referral code, and that gives me a little kickback of 50 quid to keep me going. But apart from that, you can share this with any doubters, and you can obviously like the video and subscribe to the channel, and there will be a lot less heat pump content coming, but there's still a few things that now I have a bit more space to ignore the performance of my heat pump over the next few months. But I'll have a bit of space to chat to a few of these viewers on some Zoom sessions, and we'll publish some of those, sharing some other people's experience. And also there's some other issues surrounding heat pumps that I need to get off my chest and share with you guys. So that's going to be coming over the course of the coming months into the summer. So thank you everyone for watching, and if you've made it this far, you deserve a pat on the back, and you deserve a nice foot rub and a nice hot shower, or whatever your choice is. Maybe your vice is just actually indulging on those Easter eggs that are still rattling around the house. They need to be cleared up and gone now. Bye.